Hey everybody, this is Scotty with Sketchy's Garage, and today we're working on the mean green Chevelle. I made a deal with you guys. If we got 30 thumbs up on the last video, I'd make a video of finish sanding the cab. The doors and the deck lid have already been done. I'm gonna give you guys a couple of helpful tips. One thing is like I don't really like to seal a vehicle. To me, it's just stacking another chemical layer. So on my final prime job, I take extra care not to break through. And something else that I do is, you see how we got this spot right here that's starting to show. I always like to use a different color epoxy primer than the fill primer that I'm using. That way, when I start to get close, I know to stop and don't break through. If we was using two color, like a gray epoxy primer and a gray fill primer, most of the time you'll bust down the metal before you realize it, because you can't really see the contrast in the colors. So that's just a helpful little hint for you guys. This car's been sitting for a little bit. I don't know what it may have come across or who may have come in contact with it, so we're going to wipe it down real good with alcohol. That's a good practice. I even had one that was in the paint booth. It was prepped up, ready to go, ready to paint. I went to lunch, and I guess the guy that owned the car, he came by when I was at lunch, and he wiped his hand across the fender, and he didn't say nothing to me, and I went in there to spray it, and it just got like a funny wrinkle to it, and I was like, what in the hell is going on? And then I talked to him later. He said, oh yeah, I rubbed the fender, and he had been working on a hydraulic cylinder that day and didn't wash his hands, so it doesn't take much contamination at all to give you paint problems. So it's always good practice to wipe it down as much as you can. You can never over wipe one. Today we're going to get started with 320 grit sandpaper, and then we're going to finish off with 500. You might be asking yourself, why start with the 320? Why not just start with 500 and finish it out? The thing is 320, it will not cut the panel as smooth as the 500, but it'll cut it straighter, if that makes any sense. So if we come in here and sand this with 500, we'll get it nice and smooth, but it'll still have a texture effect to it. Versus the 320. The 320 will cut it way straighter, and just little minute things like that make a big difference at the end of the project. So it's just steps that you want to take. Another thing, you might see all this yellow tape at the seams and stuff. You might be asking yourself, why is that on there? We're going to wet sand this, and it's just to keep the mud and the crud from getting down in the crevice. It'll just kind of hit the tape and roll down and out of the way. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and wipe this down with alcohol. Alright guys, we're going to use just two simple tools today. We're just going to use a medium soft block and a good old paint stick. These things are worth their weight in gold when it comes to body work. To be honest with you, if you wanted to, you could get by with only a paint stick and no sanding blocks at all. It's just some of the sanding blocks are a little bit more comfortable to the hand. We're going to wet sand this car instead opposed to dry sanding, and the reason for that is most of the other part of the car is done, and to me, as soon as you get one dirty, it seems like you can never get it clean again. And wet sanding, you don't create near the mess that the dry sanding does as far as getting stuff dirty, because it's just kind of wet and you can wipe it off, to whereas the dust, it seems to get up in the air, float around, and get stuck everywhere. So that's just a preference on my part. Another thing, we're done with body working and shaping of the car. The only purpose of this is just to get the surface smooth and ready for paint. So that's why we ain't using real long boards or nothing like that. Like I say, the only purpose is to get the panel smooth and ready for paint. So that's why we're not using a long board and all that stuff. All that's already been done. We just want to get a nice smooth surface. Alright, I'm gonna get started. I usually like to get started just on a small surface, kind of ease my way into it. Get started like on a roof or something, you're like, oh man, I got this huge roof I got to do. It's never ending. So I usually come in and do like probably this area right here first. And you're like, oh well, that wasn't too bad, and just kind of go from there. I'm a dipper. Are you guys a dipper or a sprayer? Let me know in the comments below. Alright guys, when you can pull the rag across there and it feels nice and smooth, you know that you got all the top layer texture pretty much well off of it. And it's time to go ahead and switch up to your next grit. We're going to go from 320 to 400 and then probably finish out with 500. Alright guys, as you can see, it's nice and smooth and slick. It just takes a little bit of time and effort, but at the end of the day, once you get the paint on there, it'll be well worth it. This is like the Danielson moment. You know, you got this done, you're feeling good, and then Mr. Miyagi tells you you got to do the rest of the car. So I'm gonna do that. Alright guys, we're going to take a quick little break from sanding. I want to go over something with you real quick. Might shed some light on some stuff for you. What we're kind of looking at right here is this is some primer, this is some sealer, this is some base coat, and this is some clear coat. Now earlier in the video I said how I don't like using sealer because of stacking chemicals and stuff like that. Another reason is because everything in the body working process, from your epoxy primers to your Bondo, your putties, all of them have a tendency to shrink a little bit, and the more layers that you got that can shrink, the more chance for something to look funny in the finished product. So we're just going to take a quick look, see how much the primer shrunk up right there. You know, at one time it was probably pretty much to about where the primer filled up or flaked off, and it shrunk down to a puck that size. This right here, sealer, same thing, shrunk up probably half its size. This right here is base coat. You can see this line right here, that's where it was. And after it was all said and done, you see how much is left. And then here's the clear coat. And all these products right here are pretty much well top shelf, as far as, you know, it ain't the cheapest of the cheap. It's pretty much well top end stuff. So if you're using the more economical stuff, the shrinkage is probably going to be just as much or a lot more. And the only reason why I bring that up is, let's say you and a buddy decide to paint your car this weekend. You go in there, you put your filler on there, you get all your spots on there, and we get it primed up this weekend, right? Spray the primer, we let it sit a week, come back the next weekend, we sand it down, we seal it, we base coat it, and then we clear it. That's fine and dandy, and a lot of times it'll look really good for you. But what happens is, as all this stuff cures out, it shrinks up. So you can imagine what it'll do to the look of your paint job. Most of the time, you can just go back and rebuff the car, and it'll be alright. But there is other times where it draws up so much, it looks real bad, and you have to get into it again. So what I like to do is I like to try to eliminate these two and the fillers cure cycles. Usually most of this stuff is 30 days. Sealers, on a restoration, I try not to use it at all. The primer, I always like to let a car sit 4 to 6 weeks after putting the final primer on it before painting it, just because, like say, it just takes one more shrinking element out of the process. Then that'll just leave you with your base coat and your clear coat. Now, there used to be wives' tales about people putting 15 coats of base on it and 15 coats of clear. Now ask yourself, if you put that much material on there and it all shrinks up, what's it gonna do? It's gonna peel and crack and look funny. So the old wives' tale about putting a crap ton of paint on them to make them look deep is pretty much, well, that, just a wives' tale. I think a lot of that came from the old lacquer days, but on the lacquer stuff, I'm pretty sure they buffed a good majority of it off. I don't know for sure. I'm sure there's some people out there watching that could let us know. If you do, just drop a line in the comments below, and we're gonna go ahead and get back to sanding. Okay guys, as I said before, as you're sanding and you wipe one off, and whenever you take a rag and just lightly dampen it, wipe over the panel. That way the panel's nice and shiny. That's the way it's going to look whenever you put a clear coat on it. You'll be able to sight down it and look and see how straight your panel is. Now, one thing you don't want to do is don't put so much water on it to where it'll almost sometimes fill in the low spot if you put standing water on it. You just want to put just enough to have it damp. And as you can see, quarter panel looks nice and straight for us. I'm going to go ahead and finish sanding this, and then I'll catch up with you at the end of the video. Okay, everybody, took about roughly 5 hours to sand this thing. Like I said, we started with 320, moved to 400, then finished it off with 500. As you can look and see, we didn't really break through anywhere, so we're in really good shape. Yeah, we got a nice, super smooth finish to lay our paint on top of. There's one last thing that we got to address. It's the area that we took and put the tape on. And all we got to do here is I put it really far right there on the edge. Just take a damp piece of 500, just slightly scuff across it. That's all you're going to have to do, and you'll be good to go. I do want to note one more thing is whenever you're doing your sanding, this goes like for your filler and everything. Whatever you're going to put on top of it, like we're going to put paint on top of this, we want to make sure the roughest grit we use is 320, because that's what the paint will fill. It'll fill a 320 scratch. Say if we had a spot right here that was real rough or something, you wouldn't want to clean it up with 180 and then come back with 320, 400, 500. Because you might leave some scratches in there behind that you don't catch or don't see, and a couple months down the road that spot's liable to peek its head up. So just keep that in mind. You always want to start with the grit that whatever you're going to put on top of it will cover it.